Hi. I want to say thanks to the opportunity to be here and show you this kind of singular experience. We are Albor Arquitectos and we are from Cuba. We would like to talk about the experience of our practice, especially about one of our projects, Casa Torre, because we find it interesting as a conceptual approach to the topic of the limits that the statement of this event explores. Since the triumph of the 1959 socialist revolution in Cuba, the practice of architecture and construction has changed along with society. In a call for the solution of social problems for the construction of the new state, the entire body of laws governing construction and architectural activity was restructured. At the beginning, there was a debate about the best way to assume these new programs for the construction point of view. This situation was paradigmatically reflected in the confrontation, metaphorically speaking, of the solutions proposed by the Escuela Nacional de Arte and the Ciudad Universitaria José Antonio Echeverría projects, which were between the singular and local construction and the prefabricated concrete solution that, in the end, the debate was resolved in favor of the last one. Since then, with few exceptions, the practice of architecture has been subordinated to the collectivization of design and the implementation of large industrialized construction systems. Independent practice ceases to exist, and large state project companies were formed to carry out the state new programs. Today, the regulatory framework created in response to this specific context remains in place, although new needs have emerged and the country has changed greatly in recent years. In the meantime, urban centers continue to reinvent themselves on their own structure. Despite prefabricated construction, the vast majority of housing construction has been informal or self-produced, which in Cuba is called self-built, in Spanish, construcción por esfuerzo propio. In this context, Albor rises as underground and independent practice established in the city of Cienfuegos, that is not the capital of the island, in the city in the center of the island, in 2010. Establishing a practice outside the authorized structure determines, in our case, a singular conception of architectural projects. That is some views of the Cienfuegos, our city. The condition of uncertainty propitiated by the framework of scarcity and the non-legal situation connects the programmatic and the constructive, and it determines that our work responds to the condition of thoroughness over the practice of the profession, in which we can barely discern between decision made and decision induced. The work process is carried out, is performed with almost all the supposed legitimizing structure of the profession disassembled. Albor have never had a physical studio. The four of us have always worked in parallel jobs to the studio. From our position, we depend on third parties to obtain the license of construction, and in the building side, we have not had access to the material market that is neither regulated and not stable. But the four of us have completed our degree in architecture in the conventional way of it. In this sense, then, what brings singularity to this context is the union between the professional and the popular issues, propitiated by the absence of a legitimizing framework for the independent practice of architecture, which in the end we understand as experimental and not certified. In the absence of clear construction regulation and a hierarchy of competences, typically regulating relationships get to be managed at the level of words and practical actions. Almost all the implicit professional hierarchies between the architect and the builder are diluted, and the usual sequence of the architectural project, the linear structure of conception, technical plans, and construction, are transformed into a directional multiplicity system. The undermining of the construction tradition and the technical knowledge, together with the situation of the material market, make technical forecasting of solution almost impossible. It determines that the presence of the architect at the construction site, as well as the close relation with the builder, is indispensable for the achievement of the architectural work. Casa Torre, the project that we are going to speak, catalyzed within the process of optimization and constructive adaptation of a reality that Albor has developed in recent years. The prospect of an uncertain future shaped the program of a single-family home for one of Albor's architects, a flexible and progressive house that is answered by raising a tower, a constructive core from which to overcome the challenge of the work. The multidimensionality of this process, as is to be expected from what we have mentioned so far, includes material and social connotations. For example, the builder and his family lived during the construction process in the existing house in the front part of the lot. The builder, who came from a rural area, reaches this verbal agreement for the benefit of his family and his own work, while his wife and a little daughter had better access to primary service, and the builder could have custody of the materials that were carried and the control of the execution. Likewise, the architect, in this case also promoter and user, participate daily in the construction of the house, sometimes as a supervisor and other as the builder assistant. This kind of experience of the site, this caring, allowed that technical adaptations were carried out in a consensual way throughout the building process that resolved the apparent challenge during construction, like different material supplies, cement of dissimilar origins, non-certified aggregates, and the absence, for example, of lime and additives that required experimental reduction of the mixtures. This kind of adaptation was necessary, for example, for the reinterpretation of traditional techniques such as plastering floors and walls. In this video, you can see the making of one disc floor solution. In this particular case, the recovery of the concrete plastering technique for floors and walls is a recurring technical element of the project. After several attempts in many projects, we have reached its natural incorporation to the process. In the project, for example, of El Apartamento, early in 2019, we made a deep or more deep exploration of the possibility of the material, using it even in some furniture, like the table. Another interesting example of this is the solution for the carpentry, which is another significant symbol of proceeding under blurry regulations, because this is an artisanal carpentry, and once again, the artisanal lied to the precarious and not a listening principle to the some romantic condition of the handmade project that maybe we manage in other conditions. The windows are shutter carpentry entirely made with aluminum, cast in local and domestic business, very irregular ones, where the entire casting and molding process is carried out in a very rudimentary way. The use of this handcraft carpentry, to which low-income people have access, has been explored in another Albor projects. What interests us from this solution is the double condition of its use. The imposition from one way, the imposition from the economic point of view, and the semantic exploration value that it expresses in the relation that it establishes with the self-constructed city. Finally, another example is the ground floor gate solution that was materialized and designed at the end of the project, based on the clear idea of opening onto the patio. The door was built with material recovered from an amusement park that had been dismantled in a renovation process. These pieces, which had been part of the city for many years, have a symbolic character associated with the state intervention in the public space. They were recomposed, forming large proportion sheets in an also domestic metal workshop. The idea that the material, which comes from the state construction programming, experiences a second life from an act of unregulated reformulation is also a sign of Casa Torre on performance and of our design approach. The material reformulation process of the idea traced from the project, which in our case is handled as a paradigm, out interest to the late add interest to the dialectical reformulation component of the idea or concept. The project remains alive once the conception stage has been overcome. The projection perpetuated throughout the construction, his conceptualization linked to the material, and the execution articulated throughout this dedication. Is this working condition, the craftsman-professionalism relationship, the construction from the site on a day-to-day basis, and the spatial adjustment and the comprehension of the place beyond the initial project is what we understand as beauty throughout craftsmanship, achievement a certain primal dignity. We have to say that this is a diffuse beauty, based on the expression of the self-generated, of a widely mediated site, of a craft of effort, this recurrent idea, perhaps naive, that explores a central root of architecture. That is all. Thanks.